Welcome to the Stray Pointers podcast, where seemingly ordinary people join us for extraordinary discussions. You're listening to Season 2, Episode 5 of the Stray Pointers podcast. This episode was recorded on February 13th, 2024. I'm your host, Jim Lullis. Please visit straypointers.com for more information about the show, including the show notes for the episode. Tonight, I'd like to welcome software engineer, musician, and international speaker, Christine Seeman. Christine, welcome to the show.
I already messed it up.
Boy, for an international speaker, you think your timing would have been better.
Thanks for having me, Jim. The podcasts I have attempted in the past have told me how sometimes my timing may not be the best.
Well, hey, you and I know each other from working together in the past. I know your tech career has taken some interesting turns, so I'd kind of like to talk about your tech history, kind of how you came of age in computing and or electronics or whatever the tech might happen to be. And then let's talk a little bit about the path that I kind of know you've gone down. So did you grow up with computer tech?
I did grow up with computer tech. So my dad is a doctor, but he's always been a huge fan of Macintosh computers. And I know they're Macs nowadays, but I always will think of them as Macintosh. But growing up, we always had like the newest model. So I definitely remember the Classic and the LC. And I remember it being like a game changer when the iMac came out, because like all of a sudden it was cool. Because Macintoshes weren't cool for quite a while. Like nobody thought they were cool. And then iMac came out, and that was like game changing. I remember kind of getting into high school, and that was my first exposure for Windows machines. And that's also when I first actually did some programming. So
Okay.
I did a little bit of BASIC, but it was also accounting class because the teacher was the programming/accounting teacher. And at that time, there really wasn't any other programming class. So I actually came up with an independent study to do like a website design. That website design was just GeoCities though. And so it's a little bit more guided experience going on there, but that was my first really exposure to HTML, CSS going on there. Also, my school hadn't figured out how to lock down computers yet. So I figured out how to get to internet games. And so there was a lot of Neopets had by me. And I also might have hijacked a advanced typing class at one time. And I figured out how to get into the internet connected games and taught the other kids how to get to the internet connected games.
Okay. So when did the bug bite you that you knew you wanted to get into programming as a profession?
Well, when it came time to kind of go to college, I wasn't 100%, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I did know I kind of wanted to do computers. My older brother had kind of been doing a lot in hardware at that time. So that's about 2000 or so. And so like during that big internet bubble time, he was doing a lot in Chicago. And I always thought that sounded like the coolest thing. And so I was like, I want computers. Turns out the only major with computer in the title was computer science. So I was like, well, I'll do that. It says computer. Turns out that was a lot more math than I was expecting. Still some computers, so that was really nice. And so I ended up going to school. I got a bachelor's of science in computer science, and that's kind of where my tech background started there.
What type of curriculum did that entail? What types of programming languages? What sorts of tech did you learn?
In college, it was a lot of Java. And so Java really was the first programming language there that I learned in an academic setting, because like the basic in high school was just a tiny bit. but this was like a lot more fuller learning of the programming language, I would say. Um, there was some exposure on additional web technologies, but when I was going to school, there was a lot of change going on with the version control stuff. So we actually didn't learn version control in school. I also never learned IDEs, the development environments really properly. Like they
Hmm.
had this, it was called Blue Jay, and it was like a
Yes. Hmm.
UI.
Yeah.
But the thing is it abstracts way too much for people to learn how to do actual Java programming in it. That me coming out of school, that was my only development environment, maybe could have been a little bit more robust going on there. But I also got exposure to some media design. So that was fun. It kind of working in on some graphic design. I actually have a minor in graphic design
Oh, okay.
from the school too. And so I
Okay.
always kind of like that visual component going on there. And that's also where the only Macs at school were in where the newspaper as well as media design classes were at.
Okay. Now, did you cover databases and things of that nature?
Yep, there were some databases, but it was just like MS SQL was the only database really that was covered. And as soon as I got out of school, it was a rude awakening to figure out how many different databases were actually out there. And yes, eventually I got exposed to like more database going on with like Oracle. And yes, you still had to do MS SQL. Um, oh, Access database. That's it. At school, they
Oh,
liked the
sure.
Access database too.
Sure. Sure. There was an ODBC, JDBC driver for a while that you
Yeah,
could use. Yeah. That was easy to teach at the time.
I still remember like the assignment was like you were doing a film database, and so you had to put in all these different films and then sort them going on there. Also, my a lot of my computer science professors had poodles, and all the time we learned sorting algorithms. It was always the poodle names.
Okay. I, I, that's a first for me. I've never heard anything like that.
Well,
I used to use album names.
oh yeah. Yeah, no, it's funny what sticks with you coming from school because like now it's been well over probably 20 years since university, and I still remember. I don't remember the exact poodle names, but I remember that's how I learned my sorting algorithms.
Did you have any gigs? Did you have any employment while you were still in school? Did you go out and do professional web design or even amateur web design at the time?
During school, a lot of my extra time was spent on like kind of on campus type jobs. So I was a teaching assistant for all the Java classes after I had kind of been through the Java classes. So it actually was a great review because then I had to listen to all of those lectures over again and with slightly different professors, which I actually really enjoyed kind of staying on campus for that. I helped out in the computer science office, and that taught me the very important way of how to do scans and copying, which I did for all the professors, which actually has served me well, in the corporate world. Also, I ran the computer help desk at the library.
Oh,
And so that one was always interesting, trying to help students who were most of the time the printer was jammed, but every once in a while you get to actually solve some sort of software problem.
sure. So, what was your first job out of school then?
So my first job out of school was I had the opportunity to come up to Omaha and kind of actually have an internship before I graduated. And so I got to work with this online financial transaction acquiring suite. It was like pure J2EE technologies going on there, but it was kind of cool because it was online, and not everything was online back at
Hmm.
that time. Definitely more stuff was just on premise. So to start having the hosting where it wasn't on premise was kind of new. Um, but my entire internship was actually just writing JUnit tests, if you can believe it now. So the other programmers wrote their actual code, and I would come in and try to write JUnit tests for their code. which like sounds kind of ridiculous when you think about it nowadays.
It does. I assume this predates test-driven development then.
Oh, it's way before TDD going on there, but it was one of those things that I learned a lot of. Like it was my first encounter with version control. It was
Okay.
my first big encounter on working with, enterprise code base, which is a whole different beast than any of
Hmm.
the like smaller class level projects,
Hmm.
as well as how to interact with lots of different kinds of people.
Oh, sure. Sure.
And so I loved my teammates. They were great and they were always some of the best mentors I've had. And so after I graduated school, they had offered me a job. And so then I kind of just rolled on to working on that team that I had been a intern on.
And then did you become a developer?
Yes. Yep. I after like having the internship and kind of going through school, I definitely migrated towards like the software side of things. And so yes, I knew that I kind of just wanted to do programming. Nowadays, it's like you're an individual contributor, but
Hmm.
yeah, I became a software engineer, software programmer.
Okay. Now I know your Java career lasted a while. About how many years would you say that you were a Java web developer or Java developer?
I did Java development for a good 12 years,
Okay.
actually.
That's longer than
So
I thought. Okay.
yep. So about 6 years at one company and another 6 years at another company. And it was kind of all I knew for a while. Uh, I think, it was one of those things that it was comfortable and it was easy to find roles in that. And like it was, sometimes when you start with your first technology and that's kind of like the only thing you had learned, I didn't feel confident in myself trying something else actually for a while.
Another programming language and framework called your name.
Eventually, yes. So I had the opportunity that from my first job, I've always really enjoyed meeting lots of people. And so being good at networking actually ended up getting me my third job. And so I had one of my old coworkers come to me and say, "Hey, we have a startup. They're doing really cool things. It's here in town. It's another object-oriented programming stack." And I was like, "What is it?" He's like, "It's Ruby." I was like, "What is that?" And so I had to figure that out. But eventually, yeah, about 2018-ish, I moved over to the full kind of Ruby stack going on there, and I haven't looked back.
What was that transition like? There used to be this joke of a picture for a Java developer and a Ruby developer and the web developers and the books you would need. And the Java stack was huge with 15 or 20 books, and the Ruby stack was two books. What was the transition like for you moving from a regimented Java environment to Ruby on Rails?
I'm not gonna lie, it was hard actually. So 12 years in on a programming language, um, you get a little cocky about your
Mm-hmm.
knowledge, and so it knocked me on my butt. It was one of those that it was a little bit of a steep learning curve. In that I was back on a Mac computer, which you would think since that was my OS that I started and learned first, that I would be okay with it. But my entire like 12 years I had done Java, it was purely on Windows machines. And those kind of keystrokes get a little bit embedded in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And so like it was a OS change. It was a culture shift. I was definitely the oldest person there, coming from it being one of the youngest people. So that was a shift going on there. It was a completely different industry, going kind of from financial to managed WordPress hosting, which I had no clue what a WordPress was. That was another technology I need to figure out. And that doesn't even get into the actual tech stack. So moving to Ruby, the language, was actually delightful. Like I really enjoy programming in Ruby. You just don't have the boilerplate. it's fun to read, actually. I don't know if people have read some Ruby lately, but it was easy to pick up. You know, a lot of the object-oriented programming concepts that you just know from working with Java were quite easy to translate. But there was so much of the time that I would be looking at it at a Ruby program and say, is that it? That's doing the whole thing? Because you just get used to Java with the boilerplates and the factories making the other factories and like a whole bunch of those kind of enterprise level patterns that it's hard to switch over to thinking, hey, something can just be lightweight again. Something can be readable again. Something I can use the bare objects again. Because like you just get out of the habit.
Did you just use Rails or did you use other frameworks like Sinatra for smaller things or
Starting off, it was just kind of pure Rails. So the Ruby on Rails. But since then, I have been exposed to other frameworks such as Sinatra, as well as Hanami is kind of like one of the newest one, because there are new things happening in the around with Ruby, and that's one that was pretty fun to work with.
do you use Ruby just by itself for, what you would normally do bash scripts for or anything like that? Everyday scripting?
I do reach actually for like Bash, I would say for everyday scripting. Ruby is great for testing, or sometimes when I am learning a programming concept, I might reach for IRB, that interactive REPL.
Hmm.
That's just, it's so nice to just start up. And then you can just start working with a hash, start working with like a block, and you can work through like something maybe in your head. I definitely do reach for that, but I probably don't do actual scripts in a Ruby.
Do you think Ruby would have been a better choice for a 4-year curriculum instead of Java?
That's an interesting question. I hadn't thought about that. Maybe yes and no, because the thing is with Java is it had a lot of books already on it. You know how many books there are in Java, and as well as just education and a lot in the higher learning. I think that's kind of what they were trained on too. And so, like, you just don't have the people who would know Ruby deeply. Or, like, one of the great things about when I learned Ruby is I learned it from Rubyists who know idiomatic Ruby.
Okay.
And it's one of those things that you can tell when Ruby is written by somebody who knows Ruby, which I never thought of like Java in that same way. But I do think of it like if I would read it now, like it would kind of read differently. What if I made Java code after being in Ruby for these past like couple years?
Okay. So are there other technologies that you're using in addition to Ruby?
I am actually doing some bash scripting. So it's kind of funny you think about like moving forward, but people still really need bash and
Mhm.
doing a good amount in Get. So kind of some of the products that I work on right now are like DevOps and integration for our external customers. And so that's an interesting thing how you have to piece that together.
Mhm.
And so turns out Bash is a good thing for some scripts that you need to do at kind of a more infrastructure level. And so that's something that I've been doing, as well as a little bit in Go for smaller level services that are going to be run out on the cloud. Um, there's nothing quite like how lightweight and the concurrency that you can really get with Go. That doesn't mean I like Go, especially when I have to write tests in Go, but I definitely see the point and what Go is good for.
How much of your time would you say you spend writing Go versus writing Ruby?
Right now, I'm like 100% back to Ruby,
Okay.
which actually has been nice. But if you would have talked to me 3 months previous, it was probably would have been flip flopped. I was doing more Go and Bash at that point in time. But we all know, like with your career and your current job, sometimes what you have to work on changes drastically.
Sure. So just to be clear, were you using Go just for its performance?
Performance as well as a lot of what we're doing is like the full like Google ecosystem. And so when you have those kind of cloud functions and the other things that need to go run and are deployed out over all those different servers, Go just works better.
Oh, is this in the Google Cloud platform?
It is.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Mhm. Yeah, and so you just reach for it because sometimes the amount of time you want to spend with your kind of figuring out other things, you could just be spent, programming in the thing that already works. And so Go already works with all the stuff in the Google Cloud platform. It's easier to just get that deployed out.
Gotcha. I know you started to attend Ruby conferences. Had you been to tech conferences prior to your first Ruby conference?
I had been to one tech conference before that. So in about 2008, my brother talked me into going to DEF CON.
Oh,
So the only other not Ruby, the only other conference that I had been to was that 2008 DEF CON, which was an interesting experience. I don't know if you've ever been to the hacker convention there, but
nope.
it was it was fun and I was paranoid.
So was probably everybody else there. Well, I was thinking about attending DEF CON over the summer. This last year, a friend of mine who ran bulletin board systems on CPM gear in the 80s was going to, I think he was going to put his old CPM box on the internet for along with somebody else. Something happened. I don't exactly know what, but I know that a lot of folks that went to that DEF CON conference came back with COVID. So
Oh yeah.
this coming summer, though, the conference with the group from New York, the 2600 group, uh, they are having the 15th Hope Conference, Hackers on Planet Earth, in Queens again. So that's in July. I'm thinking about going there.
So DEF CON introduced me to Capture the Flags, the CTFs, which I had not heard of before. I did not participate in that first one, but it did make me interested. It also introduced me to lockpicking, which I never thought as something
Sure.
to try out. And so that's something that I'll have a really good story about my first other conference that I talked at about the lockpicking village.
There was one of those conferences where not only did they have a lockpicking exhibition, but there was a door that was supposed to be secured that they couldn't get locked. So the speaker taught them how to do reverse lockpicking, and he taught them how, with a set of lockpicks, to lock a door.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. What was your first Ruby conference?
So my first Ruby conference was 2018. So I had been doing Ruby for about 3 months at that point in time. And my company, I asked about, I was like, hey, we have some other people that are actually speaking at the conference. I want to learn Ruby more deeply. I want to, just kind of dive headfirst in the community. Can I go to RubyConf? And they said, sure. And so I got to head into RubyConf. Also, I had the kind of awesome opportunity to be part of the Scholar program. And so I got to interact a little bit more deeply with some of the speakers. I also had a awesome, cool mentor that kind of was checking in on me and had somebody who was instantly there to hang out with me. Um, and so I got to, just dive in on the conference. I went to way too many talks. Like nobody should do as many of the talks as I ended up doing. I have a entire blog post about everything I did, and it just makes me tired reading my old blog post about this. But yes, I got to go to some really amazing talks. Like one of them is still one of my favorite talks, which is this branch in time from Tekken Suleiman. And he tells the story of a Git branch and why the changes matter with like your Git commits. And so that was something that really stuck with me. And then just, kind of getting to be immersed with the Ruby community, which was like vibrant and lots of people who did not have the same background as me. There were so many self-taught programmers. I'm kind of like the opposite of self-taught. I don't know what the name is of that is, but when I learned programming, it was always in that academic setting.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what a lot of, Ruby programmers have that background. And I found that really interesting.
That is interesting. Now, I remember seeing on your website a picture of you standing with Yukihiro Matsumoto, or Mats, the creator of Ruby. Did you actually get to talk to him, or was he just there for little, camera snapshots and selfies?
So that picture with me and Matt's, where I'm very awkwardly standing next to him, was actually just after he had done a keynote where he was kind of talking about the next steps of what was going on with Ruby, the next version of Ruby, which I think at the time might have been either 2.7 or 3.1. And so it was just really cool to hear about. This is the guy who made Ruby. This is the creator of the entire programming language. He's talking the entire technical community as a whole. And then I get to meet him. So I was definitely starstruck. And also I still don't know who actually made Java. So it was like a huge, like,
You don't know
I
James
can't believe
Gosling?
No, I didn't know that. Is he still alive?
Yes.
I know Matt's is. And so it was really cool to see that there was this person who made the programming language is so invested in it still, as well as really wants to keep the programming community really excited about it. So I didn't get to really talk to him too much, but he was a delightful individual, and I thoroughly enjoyed his talk.
Okay. Is this an appropriate segue for the lockpicking story, or do we need to wait just a bit?
Sure. So with that, after I got back from RubyConf, and I saw that several of my coworkers had presented there, and that other people were just the people who were presenting stuff. I was like, I'm a person, I'm a people, I can present stuff. So I tried it. So my coworkers encouraged me to submit a talk. I was still not super comfortable with Ruby. I was only like 4 months in on learning it. And coming from like 12 years on another language, I felt like a little baby crawling around in Ruby still at that time. So I went with something that was comfortable to me. I had always kind of done a lot in the web app security realm. And so I had been kind of implementing two-factor authentication for my company. And so I figured, hey, it's been really hard to find best practices on two-factor authentication as a developer. Like, I see that, you're supposed to enable it. I know why people should enable it. I want to know about best practices on like programming. And so that was my idea for my first talk. And so I submitted it to a local conference in town that it was its first year. It was called KernelCon, and it was a security conference. And so I was like, security, two-factor authentication. Hopefully they like that. And they accepted it. And so that was my very first conference talk. And so it was a great conference here in town. And I kind of dived in, as I do with most things, is I decided the best way to experience it is to do everything. And so I dove in and did the capture the flag. It was Jurassic Park themed, which was lovely and awesome. And I somehow got myself on this team with like a great programmer, and they're just like this guy who actually had done captured the flags at DEF CON. And it is this really big reverse engineering guy. I don't even know what he was doing. He got so many flags. And I was like, I need to, step up here and do something for the team. So I went to Lockpicking Village. Since nobody was doing that one, I was like, I can try some locks. And so I got one of the little padlocks where you have to try to figure that out. I was like, there's got to be YouTube. I can figure this out. I couldn't figure it out. I didn't do very good with it. But turns out it was a 2-day conference. So I went to Target I bought the lock, the padlock. I remembered which colors the padlocks were. I put it in my bag. I come back the next day and I pull out my padlock. I unlock it because I already know the the lock to it, and then I got the flag for it. But but what's fun is the lock picking person who was running it eventually came back over to my table because I was trying to get the next level because I was trying to help out the team with a flag, and he's like, did you sneak this in? Did you sneak this padlock in? It doesn't match any of mine. I was like, yes. And he's like, that's some good social engineering. I was like, so that is my lockpick village story.
That's very good. Very good. So you were at Colonel Khan. I know you were at another one, and I know I'd seen you post about KCDC, but you started to kind of take off going to local conventions, local in the Nebraska area conventions. But then you headed to London. How did that come about?
Yeah. So my first year kind of speaking at conferences, I applied to a lot of CFPs. So that's the call for papers. When a conference is, looking for speakers, they'll put up a CFP. I pretty much applied to all the ones that I saw. And unfortunately, I got accepted at every single one of those. But that was not my job to go be going to the conferences. So I might have gone to a few too many in the first year. Also, I do not recommend every single CFP to submit a new talk because it turns out when you get accepted, you have to make the talk. And that's a lot of work. But yeah, so I kind of started at regional conferences. And then a lot of the kind of different speakers in town were applying to NDC London, and they were talking about the NDC conferences. And I was like, well, might as well try it too. And so I gave it a go, and I ended up getting accepted at NDC in London for 2020, which 2020 in January was a great time to be in London. Now, 3 months later, 2020 is a completely different world, but 2020 in January was a pretty good time to be in London.
So there
And
were
so
no there was nothing going on with COVID in London at that time.
what's so weird is like I remember watching a TV show that I think there was some sort of like one case outbreak at like Birmingham or like one of the kind of like university towns, and it was national news for the one person outbreak.
Hmm.
And like but it was all very contained. Obviously, COVID didn't become a thing. And but at the time it was like nobody knew what it was going to be like, January 2020 hindsight.
That was close. Yep, you came close to being trapped in England,
I did.
which I suppose there are worse places, but I just thought the timing was very interesting on that.
Oh, the timing was. I had a neighbor who was a little bit worried that I had brought back COVID, which now with what we know, who knows? I was on international flights.
Sure, sure. So, uh, was there anything unique other than missing COVID? Was there anything unique about the London experience?
I think it was one of my first experiences where it was like a huge conference. NDC London was, well, KCDC is a very large conference, but it's very, very spread out. So they have like 20 tracks going at any one time. And so it's almost too large to like really encompass your brain on. But NDC London like has a huge venue that it kind of takes over. And so like it was my first international conference where it was people like I had watched their conference talks online, and then I got to kind of meet them. Like I got to meet Dylan Betty, and he had the art of code talk, which was just amazing. It kind of really kind of had dove in on the game of life.
Conway's Game of Life?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
Oh yeah. Yep. And then it's just London, so that was cool.
Now, after that, on your list of conferences, it shows that you went to, or that you presented rather, at a conference called ICR Agile. Was that an
Mhm.
international conference as well?
Nope, that was actually my one and only virtual conference I did in 2020. And after that, I decided I didn't like virtual conferences. Um, so, as everybody who has had to do anything on Zoom nowadays, you know how draining it is when you can't see the other people and you're supposed to be kind of hyped up and you're trying to get them interested in your talk, but you can't see anything. It was really quite a draining experience. I find that that's still to be the case with Zoom meetings where I don't see the people.
Interesting. So in a couple years, you left the country again for this time for us. Was it Australia? Or was it New
It
Zealand?
was Australia.
Okay.
And this one was really interesting because so this was Yao 2022. And so it's kind of the same conference. They put it on in three different big cities in Australia.
Hmm.
And this was my first conference where it didn't have a CFP. I didn't submit any papers to them. They actually came to me, and it was an invitation only conference where they asked me to come speak, and they said, "Hey, you can speak about anything you want." And that was really interesting. I didn't. I went with what I knew was good. This is my first international conference in 2 years. I wasn't going to just speak about anything. I wanted to speak about the stuff that I knew was already a good talk. And so, with a lot of these, I had done my two-factor authentication talk. It had gone through lots of different iterations, which mean it had gotten better and better theming every single time. So we were heading to Australia, so I went with the theming of, Lord of the Rings. And so I kind of switched that over and with the multi-factor authentication and had the chance to just speak with kind of really amazing speakers like Liz Fong Jones from Honeycomb IO, Dave Thomas from the Pragmatic Programmer.
Yes.
Have
Hmm.
you?
Oh,
And
yes.
then Lars Klint, which he's hopped around. I think he's at Arcana now. And then Tim McNamara, who wrote Rust in Action.
Great.
Yeah. And
Great.
so like that was and then plus I got to, hug a koala. And so that, that being like the best part of getting to go to Australia.
So I'll ask you a couple of things. I had to look this up. The Yao conference, do you know that it started out as a Java conference?
I did not. I did not know it was a Java conference.
It started out as Java and Object Oriented Conference, JAOO, and apparently this originated somewhere like in Sweden or someplace like that. And the way that they pronounce their J's is like more like a Y. So that's the pronunciation of the conference then was Yao when it was JAOO. And apparently, a lot of the Australians go up to Sweden or wherever this was to get training. So they sort of brought this back with them. So this did start out as a Java conference. Now, the other thing I'll ask you is, have you dabbled then at all in Rust?
I have not, although I did attend Tim's talk where he talked about when Rust should be used. I'm not sure if I remember what his point was. Like it works fast.
Mm-hmm.
I do remember it. It's definitely like the new sexy. Everybody's talking about Rust. It feels like Rust and Elixir are definitely like the trendy ones right now. But no, I still haven't had a chance to dabble in Rust. I'm still trying to get better at Go. Like
Okay.
I'm not somebody who likes to expand my I don't like to learn things broadly. I like to know things deeply. And so I still don't feel like I'm up to date on Go. So like just like when you read a book in the series, I have to start on the first one and then I got to read them all. And so like I have not read all of the Go books yet, which I probably won't read all the Go books, but I still need to work on that a little bit more before I would feel comfortable learning a next language. But Australia was great. It was kind of like a speaker summer camp. because not only did we have to do this conference once, we had to do it 3 times. And you hung out with the same people the entire time. And so that was one of the funnest experiences, I have to say, is just you. One of the things I like about being a speaker is you get the automatic VIP pass to talk to the other speakers because you already got that. Hey, I'm a speaker too. It's nice to meet you. And so we got that with Yao, but then also you got to hang out. It's not one speaker dinner, it's 3 speaker dinners. And so you just get more time to hang out with everybody too.
That's cool. So what's on the horizon for Christine Seeman?
Right now, I'm kind of trying to do more balance in my life. So I have a lot of hobbies. I got a lot of stuff that I like to do outside of work. And so I'm trying to be good about my commitments. So I'm a little bit more choosy about which conferences I apply to. I'm also not doing as many new talks because if I do one, I want to make sure I do it well. And good talks take a lot of time. And so that's something I've just been trying to apply to, a couple new conferences, but making sure that I'm doing it a little bit more specifically.
Okay. So do you have any tips for up and coming speakers?
I would say start small. So you probably have like maybe a tech group at work, or maybe you have a meetup in your own city. They're always looking for speakers. So that's a great and easy place to kind of start. Then work kind of regional. You may have one in your state. Maybe you have one in your part of your country. And if you are going to start applying for any conference, make sure you don't do a new talk for every single conference. Learn from my mistakes and that talks take time. Don't spread yourself too thin.
Great. Well, Christine, thanks for your time tonight. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. Let's do this again soon. Take care.